So tonight we're going to introduce web services, and we use web services in all of our projects, and this is one of the bases for the 3-tier architecture that we're going to get into pretty heavily next week. So and then it's a little bit out of the way, but I'm afraid I'll forget to tell you if I don't. If you could install SQL Server Management Studio on your devices prior to Friday, that'd be great. I forgot to.
Yeah, there's a free express version, so
Yeah,
should be good.
so should be easy enough. And we're going to use that Friday night. And so, sorry I forgot to tell y'all that already, but try to have that installed. So, all right. So back to web services. The purpose of a web service is that it will allow multiple clients to connect to a single endpoint. All right. So basically, this is just going to open up your applications. I know we do a lot of what we do in CAPS depends on what everybody else does in CAPS, and so we have services available for just as a, for instance, Carrie and I work on the scrap portal, which is for people who are scrapping vehicles. But in order to do that, we have to make sure that that the title is okay on it. So we have to call a service method that titles runs, and we actually call several of the methods, and there's just a whole slew of things. And in addition, we have to call another service to check to make sure that the vehicle hasn't been stolen and things like that. So this is all made possible by the fact that we can use services so that we're not having to write that code individually for every single application that needed to go check for a stolen vehicle, rather than having something, each individual one of us deploy something that ran the check. We can have one service that we can hit, and also we can get that data from an application that we don't host ourselves. So because it is public, but in any case, so you have all these different clients that are able to access a particular application, basically. All right. Our applications access web services via ubiquitous, which I love that word, web protocols. Okay. And some of the examples are HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, TCP, and SOAP. And so our web services return different content types. So the information that gets sent back, it can be sent back as JSON, XML, HTML, and those are just examples. So do y'all have any questions about that? Just straightforward. Have you guys used services before? Yeah. Good. Have you written services before? Yeah. That was actually one of the first things that I got to do when I started at CAPS, was that I got handed a service to write. So dealing with NCIC, incidentally, so or dealing with an NCIC service that we also wrote. In any case, yeah, they're pretty prevalent, and so I don't know too much about how they tie into the WPF stuff, though. I mean,
Yeah, you can
imagine it's any different.
use
really,
web
or-
services with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I see.
Don't ask me how, I haven't figured that part
Do what?
out. Don't ask me how, I haven't figured that part out.
All right. I just want to talk about a couple of the protocols real quick, because these are the ones that we're going to use. HTTP, this is one of the most universally recognized protocols. It's something that even people that don't know anything about computers have probably at least heard it, even if they have no idea what it is. And it is the foundation of data communication on the web. So that is the protocol that we use to communicate. It is effectively a request that the client makes and a response returned from the server. So that's all it is. It is at its base. So I have just a couple of examples of the headers here. We have a HTTP request header. It's a GET request, and we talked about the different kind of requests that could be made. When was that? Last Friday, maybe? But so we're accessing an API for the products, and the product ID is 1. And then you see it'll show you the host, and then it accepts application/JSON. Then you have the response, and the content type, of course, is application JSON, and it's got the date. This isn't a full header. This is just some of the things, and then they show like the content length, which was 67. And these are just some of the properties that are there in your response header. So you can view them when you make a web request. You switch over. Maybe if the internet works. What's my shortcut key to get into the? Okay. All right. All right. I'm sorry, I hit F12. I should have told you that. I hit F12 to get into my the developer tools and so forth. I mean, there's different ways that you can go in, but
yeah, Chrome, Firefox, and Internet Explorer, all of them are F12 to open the developer tools.
Yeah. All right. Just amazed at all the stuff that is just popping up down here. Why is so much of this stuff popping up when I'm just going to Google?
Spyware on there.
Seriously.
That's all the resources that Google's going.
Man.
The page just looks good.
Do what now?
The page looks so clean. You know,
Yeah.
all the other stuff happening.
I know. It won't stop though.
Yeah, Google might be a bad example for this because it's probably really busy.
Yeah, it's doing a lot of complicated stuff in the background for like Google Plus. All
So we'll
sorts
just
of
do
stuff.
that. See if that'll pull it. It's
The internet is also just
yeah, the internet is like going crazy slow.
It's pretty bad over here.
I mean, it's been doing this for like, I don't know, for a couple hours. Is there something wrong? Or I thought maybe that it was just a slow connection based on where I was at when I was in my class.
I mean, you guys' internet kind of sucks. It's pretty spotty. It's pretty much everywhere. Yeah.
Is it?
Living in the north sucks.
Yeah, I'm just not gonna waste this much time. Anyway, you can go in there and look at your header stuff. Yeah, I know. Just look.
Oh, there we go. You just
Did
had
it?
it?
It's still not loaded.
Oh,
But
If you go to the browser and it'll give you something that's really small.
well, here. I'm sorry. I just went ahead and clicked on it. So I just selected one, and then you can go into your headers and you can see the information. Then here's your response. So that's the web page that I assume will eventually show up when it stops loading. But you can see your header set up here. So the request URL was bonds.caps.ua.edu. It was a GET request. Our status code is 200, so it was okay, and things like that. So if you need to get this information, you can see it here. So that's just a little bit about HTTP. And the next thing that I want to talk about, do y'all have any questions about HTTP? Are y'all hypertext transfer protocol? Send stuff on the web. Okay. The next topic is ASP.NET Web API, and I'm not having you do web API for your project. We're going to do a WCF. But web API is another type of service that we can create. And it is a framework that makes it easy to build HTTP services. Specifically, web API reaches a broad range of clients. So it's a little bit easier to access from different types of applications. So browsers, which are other sorts of clients too, but also with mobile devices, it makes it a lot. They utilize the API. So the way it was built with HTTP in mind, so it was kind of built from the ground up, and so they fully utilize utilize the functionality that's available in HTTP. So it's meant to sort of reflect what HTTP is capable of. All right. And one of the things that it can do is that it's capable of content negotiation. So I've just got a definition here for content negotiation, and that's the process of selecting the best representation for a given response when there are multiple representations available. So it can dynamically choose what the best type of data is to return when the request is received. Okay, so it can do that dynamically on the server. All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
You can have a web API project and a web service project together in one project?
A web API and a web service together in one project?
As one, you're building a
Solution.
Yeah, within a solution, but not within the same project.
a
Yeah.
solution.
Yeah, you can.
So, but they're doing the same thing, right?
They typically would perform the same functionality, but they just do it in a different way, or slightly different way.
So why would
Or it can be a different way.
why would you need both of them together?
You wouldn't typically do it. I wouldn't imagine you would typically do both together. You would do one or the other. So, like a web API, like it's going to be dealing like was it the mobile guys that have to have a web API? They can't use just a regular.
They can, but at great lengths.
Yeah, it just is a lot easier to do with a web API instead of like a WCF service. They're just a little more. The WCF services are a little more.
They're harder to consume as a client. Like,
Yeah.
so like WCF is kind of a protocol that is, or not protocol, but the SOAP, which is what it primarily uses, is a protocol that's like just basically been changed over the years to like fit other use cases, and so it is incredibly large and
Bloated.
yes, very bloated. And so, but it also is, over the years, has gotten more widely accepted because for a long time that's how people made services. So like Web API kind of introduced a different idea of let's go through HTTP. So almost every single client, every single device understands that protocol. It's been around forever. You know, it's been around since the dawn of the
93,
internet.
92.
Yeah. So it's been around for a real long time, and so it wasn't a new thing. It was just, we just kind of, I guess, changed our way of thinking and came to the idea of a web API. So.
And my understanding of this, which I haven't yet in production had to do any kind of web API stuff, but my understanding is that some of the stuff that WCF like kind of gives you, part of that bloat is a way to handle your requests and stuff like that that you have to kind of manually do yourself in web API. So if you're dealing with other applications that you know can handle it, it may be easier to use a WCF project instead of the web API. But the web API would be more universally able to be consumed.
Yeah.
So.
And there's better tooling in Visual Studio specifically for WCF support. So like when you go and you create a WCF service in your project, and then you go into whatever project you're going to use it in, and you like add a service reference, it's going to like create all of these like classes and objects so that you can use it in you know, like be a client of that service very easily. So I'm sure that will happen with Web API as it grows and becomes, you know, more
ubiquitous.
used. Yeah, but that's one of the things with Web APIs.
Right.
Is it's a little bit harder to use on the code side.
Yeah. Sorry, any other questions about Web API and HTTP? No? Alright, well let's go forward and talk about SOAP. So we've alluded to a little bit of this, and maybe this will make it a little more plain. SOAP, which is Simple Object Access Protocol, is a messaging protocol that allows programs to communicate using HTTP and XML, Extensible Markup Language, regardless of the operating system. So it's because all of your basic major operating systems can deal with HTTP and XML, SOAP allows them to communicate back and forth. It just kind of you have to set up a lot of definitions for it. So when you're dealing with SOAP, a SOAP message will, a SOAP consists of your 3 different parts. You have an envelope, which defines your message structure. And we're going to talk a little bit about messages in more detail, and then also how to process the message. And then you have your set of encoding rules for expressing instances of application-defined data types, and a convention for representing procedure calls and responses. Now, like going into this, this is just basically how SOAP stuff is set up, and it refers. I'll just be honest, I hate to look at a WSDL. It just makes my head hurt a little bit. But and all of this stuff it's all like set up using the XML, and you set what your data types are and things like that. And the SOAP message says, hey, this is how your information is coming, but all of the WSDL stuff gets generated for you. You don't have to go in there and do it manually. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over it, again, because it's overly complex and it's not something that you're really going to have to do yourself. It's something that will get handled for you. But WCF and ASMX services generally communicate via SOAP. So it's just like a little more preset structure for how the messages are going to get transferred back and forth. Okay? Do y'all have any questions about SOAP? Have y'all heard of SOAP? Mixed. Yeah. Yeah, that's always fun when you're like researching and you get like Ivory ads and things like that. So, all right. So, all right. So WCF services. These are the kind that I've typically used here. Like I said, I think some of our stuff will go more towards Web API, but I would say not all of it. I guess that's always going to be dependent on who's running the project and what they choose to do. But I know some of our stuff, I know we've had some requests from DOR specifically to create APIs, but in any case, we will be moving forward with that. But for right now, we're dealing mostly with WCF services. And WCF services is just a framework for building service-oriented applications. And it is based on message-based communication. So anything that can be modeled as a message can be represented in a uniform way in the program model. So we're passing this information back and forth, and everything has, it's very controlled, and the structure of it is preset. But I don't know. XML to me is like, it's not really difficult, except for it's
ugly.
It is ugly. Yeah, that's what I say. It's like, it's not really messy because it is structured and organized, but it's just there to look at. You just don't want to see it, So, but anyway, they set all this stuff up so that the computer can consume it just fine and look at it, and we'll let them deal with such. But it is capable of sending data as asynchronous messages from one input point to another. And WCF services typically do use SOAP, but they don't have to. They don't have to communicate via SOAP, but all of ours do that we use. So that's pretty much the standard thing. I think, as we said already about services, you have multiple clients that can connect at any given point to your service. So we talk about what is a service client, and that's just any application that's consuming your service. So by consuming it, I just mean it's actually calling one of those methods that you have created to return data or perform some sort of action that you need to have done. So any of your service clients are people that are using your service. All right.
Also, WCF stands for Windows Communication Foundation.
Yes, that's true.
It's the Microsoft branded communication format.
In the era of all the various foundations,
Yeah.
presentation, communication.
Yeah. I love all the little letters that you have to learn in caps all the time for everything.
In caps, you said.
Yes, in caps, I said, yes. Yeah.
We're gonna have one day where we are only allowed to speak an acronym.
It won't be that difficult.
It really won't.
We'll take like 3 words out of our vocabulary and that'll be
We're
it.
good. Yeah.
We'll just look and be like, yes, we know. We know exactly what you're saying. All right. So a little bit about contracts. Your WCF contracts, they're the standardized way of defining the way you're communicating between your service and client. So you set this up, and these are a lot easier to read when you're looking at them than looking at a WSDL or anything like that. But this is basically how the WSDL gets created, effectively. So there's 5 different types of contracts. There's your service contract, which defines the operations that the service should support and expose to the client. So it's kind of a sort of an umbrella, I guess. Inside there, you have your operation contracts, which define your method signatures of any of the methods that you want to expose to the client. All right, so these are accessible to anybody who is capable of using your service. Okay. You have data contracts, which define a data type that will be used in exchanging data between the client and the service. So when you are communicating with a service, these are just set up like their classes or objects so that you can say, oh, we have this particular object, here are its properties, and the data contract just sets them up so that you can say, okay, we agree this is an object, and you know that here are the properties. When you're sending me this type of object, you know how to, what fields it has and things like that, so that you can communicate on a consistent idea of what that object is. And so when you add that service reference, it'll actually pull in the reference to your data contract objects, and that way you have access to them when you're creating when you're accessing the service. If you're sending it data or retrieving data, it'll use that service reference object to type your objects. All right, and then you have and those are the 3 main that we're going to deal with and use. You also have message contracts, which aren't used very often. We talked about SOAP earlier. If you want to change the way the message is consumed or like customize it, you can set up a message contract. And we talked about doing it with the authentication. Yeah, when we were doing one of our services, we had to make some slight alterations, not altercations. We had to alter it slightly, so we had to set up message contracts. And then, and again, that's not something that's very commonly done. And then you also have fault contracts, which allow you basically to define like your exceptions if they occur, if something happens, and it allows you to tell your client what type of error happened if you send one back to let them know what went wrong effectively.
So just to hit on that for a second, the reason that they're called like fault contracts is because like the whole purpose of a service is to make it so that it's kind of device agnostic on the client side. And so they have an idea of fault so that it doesn't have to know the exact exception system like within the language. So like WCF is how C# implements SOAP services. As a client, I don't necessarily know that when I'm consuming the service. So the faults abstract that, and they can be passed the same exact way that your data contracts are, just as it's an exception type.
Right. Do you have any questions about that? Alright, I'm gonna switch over and we're just gonna kinda go through building a service. That's always the fun part. It really annoys me that I have to plug this back in if I go dead on it. Alright, so I have Visual Studio open. I'm gonna create a new project. And if I click on WCF, I have a couple of options here. The one that I'm going to create is a WCF service application. If you create the library, it'll still create everything, but it doesn't have all your tie-ins for your server to run. So we're just going to create a service application. So we'll call this, what have I been using, vehicles? And as always, when we're using those templates, it's going to add some default information for us. And one of the things it's going to add is this iService, and we're going to rename it. And they give you a nice little note. It says you can rename, you can use the rename command to refactor the menu to change the name of service 1. So if we want to call it something else, can't tell if this is just slow or, there we go, okay. And we'll rename to Google Service. Will it change everything? Why is it read only? Did I do this too quickly?
I think you might have to like open it in administrator mode. Like Visual Studio.
Close it.
Yeah.
Just have the screen open.
Well, this is our last slide, so it's not like we're gonna run over tonight, so if it takes a little longer, that's it. Alright. Thank you, Resharper. If you guys haven't had a chance to download Resharper, give it a go.
There we go.
Ta-da. Okay. And oh, I really should have renamed that one first. Okay. So I'm also going to rename this one to iVehicle Service. So we're setting up the interface, and if you'll notice, by default it comes with an interface and then a service that implements it. Okay, so our interface is where we actually are decorating with these service contract, and then inside there we have an operation contract, and these are just default. They just throw it in there for you, I guess, to help you, since maybe they assume everybody doesn't already know how to set up a service. So I have a tendency to just leave them in there until I'm ready to get rid of whatever's there. So, all right. Why did Yes, I'm sorry.
It makes you feel better than the next version of Visual Studio remembers your choice on those things.
Well, that's awesome.
Like,
It just, I guess it'll make me feel better in the
Later.
fall when we're teaching this class, and I'll be like, we didn't have 20.
Well, it's an obnoxious thing, and you have to do it per file too. So.
Yeah. All right. So can y'all see that? Okay. I see. All right. So we have the service here. If you'll see, outside of our interface, this is where our service contract goes, and the vehicle service is just implementing the iVehicle service. So the interface is where we're gonna set up what our contract is. All right. So we have two operations here. We've got get data and get data using data contract. So I'm going to change these up a little bit. I'm going to say, okay, well, we want to get a vehicle. And I'm going to leave that integer value because I'm going to assume that what you're going to give me is maybe the vehicle ID or something like that. Maybe the VIN number or something. But I'll leave it as an integer. And maybe you do that, right? Okay. And here we have another operation. I'm going to just call this one add vehicle. Alright. Now, if you'll notice, they're referencing this called a composite type. And all this is something made up that they've done that has a Boolean value and a string value in it. It's just some made up class that they did so that they can pass it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, instead of a composite type, I'm going to create a vehicle. Maybe by the time I'm 50, I'll learn how to spell vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, yeah. I don't guess we can do an integer as a man. Nobody yelled at me about that. All right. So, we'll have string VIN, which we're gonna just default to nothing. We'll leave that there. And then we do int year. And string make and string alright. How they defaulted and stuff. Alright.
Are you gonna do the getters and setters with them?
I am.
Yeah, I'd leave them private then.
What? Okay.
Because that way, whenever you're looking at the properties, you're not seeing the lowercase versions as well, which are the private members.
Yeah. Are they not defaulted to private though?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you don't say it, does it, I mean,
It's still private.
that's okay. Alright.
Never mind then.
Huh?
Never mind.
That's one of those things that comes into coding, like what you prefer to see. I mean, it's there as a holdover because of the history of the language, like having come from other ones
That weren't defaulted to private?
but yeah, you don't have to, but it,
Okay, and if you'll notice, this is our data contract. Again, if you're trying to pass objects back and forth on your service, then you need to define what that object is. There's other ways that we do this sometimes, but a data contract is going to be what we use in our stuff tonight. So, all right, so basically I need to set up these getters and setters for each one of my stuff. So instead of bool value, I'm going to go VIN and
while you're doing that, one thing to note about classes that you set up to pass over as data contracts, they're literally just meant for classes that contain data only. You can't have, or you might be able to have a class tagged as a data contract that has like methods and things like that, but it's going to be, you're not going to be able to access those once the objects are transferred across the network.
all of this stuff has to be serialized. So,
Yeah, like you were saying, like the data contract makes it to where WCF knows that it can serialize something or knows what it needs to serialize to, to say, hey, whoever's using this service, these are the things that I have available to you, things that I can serialize for you and make available.
All right. So I need to.
Where's that serial references coming from? What's adding that?
What now?
Where like
Oh,
those little notes is
That's a
that?
2013 thing, it's called Code Lens.
Ah, gotcha.
Unfortunately, only available in Ultimate.
Mm.
It's like $1,400 feature.
It's pretty cool.
It is nice.
It makes navigation a lot easier.
It can time the version control and stuff too, so it show you who the last person to edit one was, and then.
You
That's
can
cool.
go and curse people out way quicker because you can see like, and it does it like by method too.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Allows you to place blame easier. I like it.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Well, I mean, obviously.
It's really nice.
Isn't that how you spell year?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Did I do everything? Alright, so I've set this vehicle up. Now, if I'm adding a vehicle, I'm just going to say void here. Sometimes you might send back something that says, hey, we did what you asked us to do, but for my,
Like a response object.
yeah, a response object that says, hey, we actually added what we're supposed to. I think some of our stuff we send back an integer that just says yes or no, something like that.
Or this is the ID that was created.
Yes, the ID, yeah, that's good. So if you're generating a new object and then you need to use that later, you want to know what the ID is. So yeah, you can send that back. For right now, I'm just going to send back void. So and I'm actually not going to make any of this happen yet because we are going to do database stuff on Friday night. So once we start doing database stuff, man,